I'm not seeing it yet. Oh, I see it now.
Okay, super. So JC asked us to get together tonight and talk about the second recording of the training that Dan Bell did. He wanted us to review. He gave us the 3 things to review, and Chris and I will go over that. So let's just go ahead and jump into that. So Chris, I'll go ahead and start and ask you, and then I'll ask who else wants to ask their or answer there. So Chris, what was your biggest takeaway from that particular training?
Donna and I had an opportunity to talk about this a little bit earlier today, and I very candidly said that it was a reinforcement of my whole journey in terms of breaking concepts of offering, even the business to people, and which is ridiculous because, of course, I came to Optavia not because of the health program, but because for the coaching opportunity. So it's ridiculous that I used to have such terrible concepts. And for the first couple of years of coaching, I did not offer coaching. But Dan Bell, kind of explains that it's so important not to have a filter. And when we ourselves or when we coach our new coaches to do a big freestyle brainstorm of people that they know, it's really important to catch yourself every time that you want to eliminate somebody before the name hits the paper. Dispel any kind of filter that you might have, because it's very presumptuous to think that you know what somebody else needs or wants. So that was one of the takeaways that I thought was very helpful, because I'm not the only one who started off with coaching with concepts about offering coaching, right? I couldn't possibly be the only one. And I think that's really an important takeaway. The other thing are Dan's sound bites, and I took screenshots of things to say. I think he's very gifted in saying things so simply, naturally, calmly. So for instance, an example highlighted in yellow, this is literally taken from the slideshow. What do you do? Well, you could simply say, well, I help people create better health in their lives. Or I'm an Optavia coach. I primarily help people get to a healthy weight and support them in learning healthy habits to create better health. But being able to say that so easily, I think most of us in the room have figured out for ourselves what's the most natural response, but to be able to give this soundbite to a new coach, I think is gold. Other explanations under the what do you do, I took screenshots of all these, because even though these are Dan's words, I think that they're worth having on hand, having on your phone, and teaching them to our newer coaches coming on board. What about the rest of you? Any big takeaways for you from this particular Vimeo?
I'm going to go Lois and call on somebody if no one raises their hand.
Can I raise my hand?
Oh yeah, Valerie, go ahead.
Sorry, you can't see me. So Chris and I have actually talked about this. We talked about it at Go Global a couple years ago, how both of us came into Optavia in a very similar fashion, and we both didn't offer coaching right away because we had our concepts about it. And it's funny because we think about it now, Chris, and I'm sure you can relate now. It's like, why? I don't even know how I had that concept. I
could kick myself for having that for so long. Yes.
Yeah, and you're just like, how? And I think it comes with just us becoming more open to talking to anybody and judging ourselves less, and so I think it's having that conversation of just identifying just people on a list because it's who they know. You never know who they know, and really, really quickly, just in terms of this identifying and meeting people, a real estate agent in my BNI group, we talked today, and he said one of his celebrations for himself was that he had a really difficult client who, just was just difficult in terms like for her property and like buying and selling and all of these things. And so instead of just blowing her off because she really didn't have a lot of money and she only wanted like $100,000 property, whatever, but he still treated her as if, you know, she was a really good client. And then she ended up referring him a guy that had a boatload of money and wanted to buy a cash property. And so it really, you don't know who they know. And I think that's something that I'm going to try to just, you know, instill in myself, but also instill in my coaches too, because it's not really about the one person that you're going to talk to. It's about who they know. I think that's what I got from it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Awesome.
There were lots of very valuable pieces to this this lesson, if you will. What other things did you guys find valuable?
Lois, go ahead.
So I'm always big on, you know, connectors and getting out of the house and going to meetings. Some of the most valuable people I've met have been at these women's business meetings or the Palm Beach Women's Chamber of Commerce. I find that the speakers that they bring in really, really open you up to bigger possibilities. Like one time I met that, oh my gosh, of course, the phone call's coming in right now. One of the speakers I met was somebody who was a network marketing specialist, and we brought her to the group. And then the next person that I met was somebody who's a social media expert. So that just opens your eyes to the fact that it's not an immediate payoff, but you learn so much from these people. And again, it's the connections that you make. So I have gotten a client and a coach from one of the meetings. And the interesting thing is my latest coach that I signed up a couple of weeks ago, I've known for 6 years, and she doesn't need the program. She's like Chris and like Val, who, you know, she's a yoga instructor. She's in great shape, and we know each other, and she knows what I did, but we finally had the opportunity to sit next to each other and have a conversation. And she realized the passion that I show for what I do. And she said, "You're really passionate about what you do. Tell me more." And it just kind of, you know, evolved from that. So it's really, you know, you can't do everything on social media. A lot of us think if we stay home and we just spend all day on Facebook or Instagram or something like that, we're really going to be able to build a business. And I think, you know, Dan was saying, get out of your house, go to networking groups, go to events. And then that Cynthia Greenawalt, the network marketing specialist, also said, you know, you have to make a deposit. So like Val was just saying, you know, somebody really being kind to someone that's not particularly a big account could net you somebody who is. So it's really treating everybody as though they are, you know, valued and that you can help them in some way. And then they in turn will remember you. Even my niece, who's a physician, and her husband, who I really, you know, they belong to like a 200 physician group, and I could never speak to them about the program. In fact, my nephew's very overweight. But I was helping them because my sister moved, and by helping them and unpacking and driving with her, we got to spend quality time together. And now she said to me, "I gave your card to somebody the other day," because she never ever asked about what I did, but we were kind of stuck in the car, sitting next to the person who I've known for the last 20 years. And 9 of them, I've been a health coach and lost weight, and she knows I've helped people in the family. But it's that, you know, all of a sudden, seeing that, you know, you could spend time together and really get to know what the other person is about. So again, you've got to you know, what I learned is you have to get out of your house and encourage your coaches, not just to sit on Facebook all day, because a lot of them do that, and spend some time outside. You know, some are doing walking groups and things like that, but I think these networking, and Chris Puglisi will address the BNI, I think, right? How valuable that is. Or you can tell us how valuable that is. And no, aren't you in the BNI? You're not in the BNI group, Chris Puglisi? Oh, she's on a phone call. No? I don't know what she was. I'm not going to
You were going in and out, and I was like, I'm hearing every other second. And then you were like, right, Chris Puglisi? And I was like, wait, what? Yes, I'm in
No,
the
I was talking about the value of being nice and all.
Absolutely.
Right? So I think that's something to, you know, it's really hard to get people to understand. You have to go out of your comfort zone. I don't like to go to these meetings alone with strange women, and you know, I don't know what I'm going to find, but you basically find people like you who are looking for this, you know. So that's it. I just like that part of it with the
Picking back on what you were saying, I definitely realized, I think because life has been so busy, that I'm not in as much open circulation that I'd like to be in. I'm in circulation in certain groups, and I've been in those certain groups, like church-related groups, for a while, but I need to change up where I am on the outside. And that's a really great point. Chris, did you have some takeaways that you wanted to share before we get on to the
Sure.
next?
Yeah, I'll just really quickly, and I'm going to piggyback off of Lois because like I said, I only heard a couple things of what you said with the BNI, but I joined I joined initially with my practice, chiropractic, when I was like 6 months into practice. And I mean, it's been awesome for me, but maybe like 2 years ago when I really started focusing more on coaching, that role was open. So I was double dipping, and I didn't want somebody to come in as a coach and then me not be able to help the group. So I actually left my role as chiropractor in the group and joined under the health coach position. I still had people sending me patients because they knew me for a couple of years and there was no other chiropractor, but, just from not necessarily the referral or relationship. I mean, there's so many positive things that I could say about BNI, but I would say, especially too, just for like personal development, they had asked me to be the president 6 months ago, and I was like, you know what, like, I know this will help me, like, push me outside my comfort zone, allow me to step up a little bit more, and like when I'm doing public speaking and that type of stuff, it will come more naturally. So there is so much like personal growth that you actually get from it too, whether you're in a leadership role or not, but just being able to stand up in a room full of people for 60 seconds every week and say who you are in the best type of referral. You know what I mean? It gets you better at practicing your story. You know, you get to present, and you do. I mean, I've had visitors come in that were massage therapists that joined as coaches. I've had, you know, people in the group on, you know, as clients. So I've had just different people that will allow me to almost do like corporate wellness for like their business in a sense, come in and do health talks. So just from the networking standpoint, it's definitely been beneficial for me. One of the things that I think was really just, I know it's so simple and we talk about like filling the funnel all the time, but just to see actually like not necessarily the categories, but just like, you know, the sphere, how it was like, you know, the people in the middle, the closest, your family, your friends, you know, your acquaintance, your coworkers, the next sphere out. And to really think about how all of those really do connect. Like if you're spending all your time on social media or something and you're trying to connect with those people, those aren't necessarily the people that like trust you initially, like your friends and family do, or your coworkers, you know, or, you know, if you're just, so I think like really being conscious of like where you're spending your time within those buckets or spheres, and then really focusing on not just filling one sphere, but really kind of balancing that out, was kind of an eye-opener for me. And I think just like the way that Dan Bell just so eloquently had those little sound bites for, you know, what do you do? Like you should be able to comfortably say what you do and not feel like you're like fiddling over your words, you know. And that comes with confidence and practice for people. But I think just from that ease of saying, hey, this is a great example, but make it your own for as you're teaching the new coaches that. Those are just some really, I think, basic step-by-steps, you know, that it's so simple and basic that there isn't a reason why we really shouldn't be able to like bring in a new coach, and if they're willing to do the work, like grow and know everything that they need to know, you know?
Yeah. Those are really good points. And Donna, earlier today, you had some great takeaways on with regards to the second question. What aspect of identifying candidates do you need to improve on and master? We were talking about this a little bit earlier. And what were your thoughts on that for yourself?
Oh, I have a ton. I have a ton that I still need to learn, and I love listening to these because I'm still learning, and I still have people that I'm trying to teach. And you are in part, you know, stuff too. And Chris, you had just mentioned even in talking about your biggest takeaways, and you talked about even just the the verbiage of things to say that you took screenshots of, and I took a lot of screenshots as well. And you talked about, we may have these things down, but they're things to share with our new coaches. And when you look at this group of leaders here that JC's helping us to develop, that's what our role is. We've got to develop new coaches. So that, things that we're learning and needing to improve in, we need to be helping others to do too. So that's like, we get the double stuff, double dipping, like Chris had said earlier. We're learning things we need to improve in, but it's really to benefit others as we're helping them to grow. But some of the things, and I think I've gotten a little bit better about some of these common mistakes he mentioned, but it's helping newer coaches to avoid these common mistakes of when you first meet someone, of being too anxious or talking too much or telling too much or being too salesy, and being not comfortable with the silence. I've gotten better at that. I know I need to be even better, but helping new coaches or coaches to get better at that. But some of the things that I know that I need to get better at is just to not look at people and say, oh, they're already so busy. Why would they want to take something else on? All this prejudging, being prejudiced by, or they already have a lot of money. Why would they want more? And just like we tell our like a new client candidate, we know that there's so much else that they get besides just weight loss. And even when we look at, because if you printed out the finding client and Optavia coach candidates that they mentioned on there, and JC said that he added it to the files. I couldn't find it, but you can find it in Coach Answers. But there's a page in here that talks about, things that come to mind, and it talks about if someone needs to lose a certain amount of weight, and that's, obvious. That's one of our first obvious things, but it also talks about, if they need to lose or get rid of blood pressure meds or cholesterol or diabetes or things like that. But there's so much more, especially when you're thinking about the business side, because right now, 5 of us women on here, and Lois mentioned this earlier, 60% of us did not have a weight loss story. 3 of you guys didn't come to Optavia for weight loss. Lois and I are the only ones that came to Optavia as clients first to lose weight, and they became coaches. The 3 of you, Chris and Valerie, came primarily for the business. So if we're only looking at people as clients first and then turning them into coaches, and I admit I'm like the #1 offender there. And then I'm over analyzing my clients to see who I'm going to allow to have the opportunity to even discuss coaching with me. I am way too picky, and I told Chris this earlier. When I had my huge front line, a lot of them have already gone, and I've missed the opportunity. I've made them miss the opportunity of they may come back and I'll still be in touch with them, but I missed the opportunity of offering coaching to them. But I think when we think about or let our coaches or even clients even know of all of the things, and this is the page, it's like on page 2 of that handout of the things like blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, but also, and this is something we did at our last Healthy Happy Hour, the previous one that we had, we just went around the room and found out how much everyone lost. So we lost over 400 pounds in our people that had come, but I didn't want to focus on weight at the next one. So it just came to my head to ask, and I said, who has gotten rid of or reduced their acid reflux? And more than half the room raised their hands. And then I asked about bloating, and the same thing. And I asked about that because I purposefully have to remind myself to ask that, because I've not experienced either of those. I don't know what that feels like. But my husband got rid of acid reflux, and he had like 10 pounds to lose. He really didn't need to lose weight at all, but he went on program to get healthy. I have my clients bring that up all the time. So I asked those 2. And then I also asked about sleep and energy, because that's so common. And like everyone raised their hands. So all of those things we need to remember that people need. And when I asked that, I just said to them, I said, so when your friends are talking about these things, when you're just having conversation, ask them if they wouldn't like to be doing the program that you're doing, because they can get rid of some of that, and then you've got a community around you of people. And when you go out to eat, it's going to be easier because they're not going to be eating pizza while you're trying to eat a salad. But just being prejudiced about who I'm going to offer either the program or coaching to was like the biggest thing. I've been hearing that for years. It's just I sometimes need to hear it even more. But the other thing that really jumped out at me, and I'll try not to take up too much more this time, is that at one time, probably other than our mom, everyone we know was a stranger. So when we are starting to meet people, we need to realize that, like, even our spouses, at one time they were a stranger. Our best friend at one time was a stranger. So we need to invest in the process of making friends and becoming friends. And they're not all going to work out, but as in developing relationships. But just know that as we go out to make friends, whether it's on Facebook or in community or groups, just to develop relationships, whether they're going to become real good friends or not. And Kathy's been my friend for many, many years. Jerry's been my friend for many years, and my niece has been my niece since she was born. But the rest of my coaches, 3 years ago, I didn't know them at all, and they're very precious. They're like I tell them they're my dream team. I love them in my soul. But 3 years ago, I didn't know that they existed. So those things just really jumped out at me. So that's really the thing that I need mostly to improve, is just to not to prejudge and just realize that stranger might, in a couple months be one of my best friends, or someone that's great on program that can impact other people's lives.
Yeah, that was good. What about anybody else? Things that you realize you need to improve on so that you can better teach your coaches? Anything strike you as sort of on your list for self-improvement?
I'll piggyback off of Donna and just expand on that a little bit. I think that I've gotten better at prejudging and not prejudging, I guess I should say, and qualifying people more. But I know that's something that I still do, that I catch myself on doing. And especially when it comes to, I think, sometimes the healthcare world, because they do tend to be a little bit more like, I don't want to say judgy, but they do tend to be more like, well, medicine's the way, or like, this is how it's always been type of thing. You know what I mean? So they have a little bit more of and I think I just put it in my own head of sometimes chiropractor directing at a medical field, they have their own like background talk going on. So again, I think that's just stuff that I need to get over in my own head and just kind of continue to find like the providers that I enjoy partnering with, and just branch obviously outside of that, but just not prejudging and recognizing that, it's so different. Donna had mentioned there was 60% of us came because of not for coaching, but sometimes I feel like I have a hard time with actually relating to my clients because I've never had that before. And so I can be empathetic and I can be supportive, but I don't know what that feels like. I've never had that before. So sometimes, and I know for me, like just even in being a coach for 2.5 years, I've been the healthiest that I've been because I have people watching me, regardless of the weight. But I do know that, somebody doesn't need to be perfect and 100% integrated and everything like that to see the value of coaching for themselves and their own journey and how that can actually kind of help them to move forward. So like that accountability piece. And I just think that being able to like offer it to everybody, like as much as we try to build a relationship with our client check-ins all the time, sometimes we don't know like the behind the scenes stuff, and sometimes we do. Like some clients are open with that and other ones aren't. But I just think especially when it comes to coaching, like if you're not offering that to everybody, then like what are we really doing? you know, like everybody deserves the opportunity. Like I think that Donna had just said, like, how is it how is that my right to not offer that to somebody, you know? And I've just kind of gotten that more and more in my head. And I don't really care what my clients say when I say, you know, something related to coaching. If they're not ready to hear it, that's fine. I'm going to brush over it. But like, again, that's not my decision to make for them to not offer a full trilogy. So that's been kind of hanging more in my head of the whole just stop prejudging if I am and catching myself doing that. And then actually really helping my coaches to do more of the free association to continue to build the client list. Because sometimes I'm guilty of just like having my dry erase board and I have my list, but I'm not working off of my big lists that I've made for myself. So I think being able to transfer, number one, be doing that more personally for myself, and then to actually be able to transfer that skill more so over to my client or my coaches, so they don't feel like they're just grasping out of thin air or like meeting somebody randomly or whatever it is, that somehow, leads to clients sometimes, but being more intentional about using the list and helping people to like recognize that they know more than 5 people, you know. And I just think that I've never used that document before. So I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I should be using that document with every new coach so that they're literally getting the step-by-step process a little bit more concise. And I know that if I do that, and again, like just how your coaches watch what you're doing, it's just going to help everybody. So I think those are kind of my 2 really big things that I need to focus more on, and also then transfer over to my coaches better.
Paula, I just read your note. You're going to do a build your list soon. Tell us about that. Whoops, you're muted.
I've done that for years and years. And I actually have that document, oh my God, from Dan Bell from the very, very beginning. And I used to do this as a regular occurrence with my coaches, my brand new coaches. And then I had a coach, I won't mention any names, that gave me like a little snide comment about it. And when I allowed what people thought about me, I stopped that behavior. But I don't care what people think about me anymore. And I know, because I'm a good health coach and a good leader, that is a skill that I have to transfer. And so what I do in that is I actually do that document. And I'll be on there for an hour, or I'll do it a half hour at a shot. But it is very powerful when you go through and even read every state. It's amazing how it jars people's memory. I used to use the yellow pages. We don't have phone books anymore. But when I used to do this 13 years ago, we still did. And I used to use Dan Bell's document, but then I used to use yellow pages. And I used to train my team that if you don't have a document, hold on, I got to plug my phone in. If you don't have this document, that you can always do a build a list by using the yellow book pages. I know Lois, you have to remember some of those from years ago, right?
Yep.
And so, it's, you know what, but have you stopped doing that? I have.
You know, I don't have to go through the yellow pages, but I do say, who do you know who's a real estate agent, a divorce lawyer?
But I mean, have you gone through a document that detailed anymore? I haven't.
They've been doing them on the boot camps a little bit, so I haven't been doing it personally, but they did do one, I think recently on the boot camp, that was like, who do you know? And I think it's really important for people to know. You know, we learned this from that Cynthia Greenawalt marketing.
Right.
You know, a divorce lawyer knows that people need to reinvent themselves after they get divorced, so they might have to change their body. A real estate broker might have to find somebody a new home who's recently divorced.
Right.
Or conversely, somebody who's getting divorced might need a new home and doesn't have a divorce lawyer yet. So it's seeing the connection between all of these different people and
Right.
have, making a deposit for each one of them and connecting
Right.
them to each other, connecting the real estate broker with the divorce lawyer, with the clients.
Right.
So, those are kind of other free association things. But really going through, even a dry cleaner has a tailor in the dry cleaner shop, and people come in to have their clothes made bigger or smaller.
Yep.
So
Absolutely.
all of those different kinds of connections are really important to, just.
But you know what? When somebody doesn't sit and take the time to do that, and I'm going to tell you that my last, I'm going to say 6 coaches really never took the time to make a list. Now they're still all here and they're still building their businesses, but it's going to go much faster if they have a list. And I'm just going to work from the very beginning, because what I'm learning from all of these videos is the simplicity of it all. Dan Bell just brings it back to the basics, and without all the hoopla. And doing the basics is so important, down to the dream. Guys, I watched the first video. I was guilty of completely going to the how and completely missing the why. And JC called me out in the leadership thread and said, Ma, go back and watch it again. You missed it. And I go, I will. And I didn't. And I came back and I did like one of these, like V8s, like watched it the second time. And it just was glaring at me then. So, I think, I have older eyes in coaching. So do you, Lois. So I think when we look at things, we examine things too deeply. I'm guilty of it. So I went straight to that whole thing with the how, and we weren't even up to the how yet. So the lesson I learned is I'm dialing it back to the basics. I made my whole entire team that gets together on Wednesday nights watch it, and then I said, come to the table with your takeaway. And if they miss it like I did, I'll have them watch it again, because it was a very valuable lesson. But those that came to the table and give me their why, they're ready to go on to the next one. And that's building a list, really. That's the next step. That whole video to me was all about building a list. Did anybody get anything else out of it?
Yeah, well, we've shared a couple of takeaways, and I'll interject.
I know, I'm sorry. I was on a health assessment. I apologize.
And just one thing real quick, and Val must have had to drop off, but one thing, because we say, make a list, make your hundreds list, make your top list, let's get your first health assessment scheduled. But this is so nice being such a jogger, a mind jogger, to even just say, well, who is most successful, who likes to travel, who's a dreamer, just, this is so good. And I'm sure I've seen this before. I'm not saying I've never seen it before. No one's mentioned it to me. I'm just saying it was good. Like
it
you said,
used to be in our
it
original coaching kit. So that very first kit where we had like 7,000 binders. Lois, do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, that wasn't me or any of the coaches on my team.
No, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
It's really good, and and again, the simplicity. And what I also like about what Dan did is this was just about making your list, and he said, and I think this is good for us to share with the coaches on our teams, is don't worry about how you're going to contact them or what you're going to say to them. All you're doing is just doing a brain dump and just putting names down, and don't worry about what you're going to say to them. So
that's right.
Anyway.
So I'm doing a brain dump, and I will open anybody that wants to come in. It's boring if you don't want to make a list. But if you really want to make a list, I'm just going to go through the document and I'm going to read. Because I find that when I do that in a group, everybody gets motivated to do it. If I leave somebody to do it, they do it haphazardly. They don't really go through it. So it's a way to add some accountability in there.
Okay.
So
just we'll let us know when you launch Zoom.
I will. Absolutely. I absolutely will. And you know what, Lois, do you remember my document 3 in 30? I still have that. And that is really good. I used to do that at events. I used to do a memory jogger at events, and we'd get 30 contacts down in 3 minutes.
Yeah. So, Lois,
So-
did you have a chance to answer this number 2 about what aspect of IDing clients you wanted to improve on and master? Did you get a chance to answer that?
Wait, let me, hold on.
Honestly speaking, I've been cleaning out my house this week to get it ready to go on the market and packing to go south. So I did not specifically sit and answer all of those questions.
Okay.
But, another takeaway, and I'm not sure if it was from the boot camp this week or from Dan, was that, use your mentorship. And I think it was more maybe from the boot camp. But the interesting thing is that the people who called me all the time, like a Chris Denzel, are the ones that are the most successful coaches. And you can't impress that upon people enough, that you can make all the lists in the world, but if you're not actually making calls to the people and doing a 3-way call or a health assessment or something from that list, it doesn't matter how many people you write down. You have to really know at some
Well,
point.
there needs to be
what
action
to do.
behind it.
There has to be some action behind that list. And
Absolutely.
so someone like Chris, who we were on the phone all the time, and she apologized to me every single day. I'm sorry. And I was like, don't apologize. I love it. I now have the person who's the yoga instructor, and talk about prejudging, belongs to a country club. She's an interior decorator. She teaches yoga. I could have said she doesn't need the money. She's too busy. But she told me she wants to give up the interior decorating because it's not so lucrative. And it's quite annoying, actually, she said, and she's looking for something else. So if I prejudged and said she's, I shouldn't even have this conversation with her, she wouldn't have signed up. But the other point I want to make is she calls me every day. She's read more probably in the life book than most clients have by now. She's read the Habits of Health book. She's been on Zoom. She's been on the boot camp, and she signed up her first client. But she calls me all the time, and it's refreshing because she really wants to know more. I'm not dragging her through the mud. So really, when you have somebody like that who understands it's okay to call and keep asking questions. And again, she says, I don't want to bother you, and I'm really sorry. And I'm
Fan the fire.
Whatever it takes, because that's the person we did health assessments already, it's a pleasure. So really to identify somebody like that, or not to pre-qualify and not bring it up to them. That's exactly what you said, Donna. We all had those concepts. Chris and I, they're in a neighborhood with expensive houses. They, their husbands have big businesses, or they're business women. They're too busy. They're too wealthy. Not the case. You don't know behind closed doors, right?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You do not know.
Yeah.
Very, very true.
I'm going to have to hop off because I'm running the 6:30 call tomorrow, and I've got to have my stuff out of the house because I'm going to take pictures of this house. So I'm going to say thank you, everybody.
Good night. Good night. Good night. So, Chris, I signed up my first stock from the obesity conference. Cha-ching. I'm so happy.
Great.
Very, very happy. Yeah.
So the last question then is, and we've kind of covered some of this previously, but how can you start helping your coaches? So Chris, if you'd answer this one first and see who else wants to chime in, but how can you start helping your coaches that are not skilled at identifying candidates and list building and free themselves to build massive lists and see the abundance of potential that they all have?
Well, I think it's in this document.
I do too.
And I needed Donna's help to actually find the document because, Dan Bell referenced it in the video. And then I was sure I was going to find the link to this document under the video. There was none. And Donna had to tell me it is actually in Coach Answers. So you just go to Coach Answers and search the word finding, and the document will come up for you. It is really all here. And back to what Paula was saying, that Dan is all about reminding us about some very simple things to do. And this is a very simple thing to do. And just...
it's worth the investment of time.
Right. I think that when a coach first starts out, we have that in the learning portal that talks about, building a list of 5 to 10 names. And then they get going with their initial health assessments based on that. And then this is sort of the next step. Those 5 to 10 names is that inner circle in Dan Bell's slide that's just
Yeah.
it's the low hanging fruit. It's your closest friends, it's your closest family members, people who are not scary to talk to, or they might be friends who've already commented on the new coach's weight loss and have said, making comments like, I got to do what you're doing. So those are the easiest people to approach. And then beyond that, it's really working this document. And I've never worked this document myself, so I need to do this myself. So that's on my next step to do.
The basic. That's
basic.
what he is. It's amazing. And you know what, Chris? I'm coaching 13 years. I haven't done that document in 13 years for myself.
Yeah.
Shame on me. My world's changed
Dramatically.
Absolutely. So, you know, it was really very eye-opening. And now I'm watching all of his videos with a different eye, because instead of complicating things, which we are all really good at doing, I want to look at the simplicity of it and just get the systems down. Because from doing the Balian leadership training, I have found that I work absolutely the best in structure. So now I'm like seeing Dan for just what he is, structure.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Simple
structure.
Simple structure too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
And
great.
so, yeah, I think that, you know, I think most of us work very well in structure, but for me, it's a do or die. If I'm not in structure, I don't get things done.
Mm-hmm.
So I just realized, really, this stuff is gold.
Yeah.
It's platinum.
Yeah.
Really, it's platinum. So what else with you, Chris, about it? What are you thinking? What's the other Chris thinking?
I would have said the same thing as Chris, of like, what are my first action steps are actually doing the document for myself, and then being able to almost like I would say with existing coaches, a workshop on it, you know, on the team.
Yeah.
I think that'd be a great way of bringing that back in. And then obviously with new coaches, after that first, you know, initial, who's those first 5 to 10 people on your heart, or, you know, writing them down, actually going to, this is the next step for how do we build the business, and being able to kind of create, it's like the 5-in-1 for your business. It's like the actual roadmap, you know, like,
Right.
And if you don't have that, then you're just going on any road. You know what I mean? Like, so I think that just for me, I mean, we all know that structure is our friend. So being able to do that for ourselves. And I think that a lot of the times our coaches watch what we do, and we want to make sure that we're mirroring that properly. So definitely doing that for myself, and then, you know, workshopping it with the team, and then starting off any new coach very like systematic with the documents. And I think for me, like, you know, we all came into coaching with different ways and different coaches and mentorship and everything like that. And it doesn't matter who our coach was or how we started, or if we feel like we should have had better support in certain areas or if we didn't know about the program because we were coaches first. But I just think that like now it doesn't matter. Like it should just be like wipe the slate clean, because there's literally a document and like a step-by-step process for everybody. So there's no, like, it doesn't matter.
Right.
So that's kind of like how I'm looking at it.
Right.
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 So Valerie,
I think it's a rebirth of the business too, by being able to rebuild, by building that list, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel, for me, right? What about you, Donna?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I've already talked at length about this list. I think this is great, and I'm planning on doing it for the coaches on my team as well. And I've really liked having that. Valerie, how about you? You hop back on.
Yeah,
There you are.
Actually,
Your
yeah,
face,
I'm
actually.
home. I did
Yay.
that. I'm home. So I need to go through that list. I think that I was actually working in front of my coaches the other day about like, who do you know, and you know more people than you think you do, just stuff like that. And and I get a lot of referrals, but I'm like really intentional about referrals, and that's kind of where, like, I've always thought about referrals, and I have a huge bowling community, and so that's where I go. for a lot of my clients and possible coaches too. But with that list, I think I'm going to reiterate what you guys, I'm going to, just piggyback off of it and say, I need to go through that list too myself and bring at least one of my coaches through it, and then possibly do, a workshop. Yeah, I think that's pretty much about the list. I love that idea though, that there is a huge list. I actually went as far as writing all of my clients on the wall, like every single one of them. And so I think that I need to do the same thing, but with potentials. And that's going to be my next step. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, and it's really good too. We've got some new coaches, like a couple layers down from me, that are like, boy, I don't know that many people. I'm not involved in many things. I only have a few Facebook friends. And so, again, I love just the joggers here, the mind jogger. So who do you know that hates their job, works too many hours, is hurting financially, is your best friend, is a great counselor, likes to work with people? And then who do you know that lives in Kansas, lives in Missouri? I mean, every state, if you can come up with people like that, and then is in healthcare, is a hobbyist, is in investment. When you list different, you know more people than you realize. And when you have this document, you can just, and again, especially the key, I think that Dan said, and I already said this, so I'm just gonna repeat myself, don't worry about how you're gonna approach them or what you're gonna say, or that's gonna be next week, he says. And so I guess JC will give this to us next time, but don't worry about that. That's the next step. So just like what they say about how we train coaches is just in time, not just in case. So we're not gonna dump stuff on them, just put some names down and have them down. So
Right.
this is kind of like been the winner. I love this.
Absolutely.
Honestly, the power in having over 100 names on a list, if you have the first 5 people say no, you don't feel like you don't have a business. You have 95 more people on that list. And so it feels better when you actually start out with a very big list. I'm going to be honest, I don't particularly care when they say put the first 5 to 10 names down from your heart, because if they all say no, the people don't want to go beyond that. That's what I have seen. So I like the big building of the list right out of the gate. I just think psychologically it's a better vantage point. And that's how I was trained from years ago from Dan. And that's how he's doing this training. It's everybody. He's not saying the first 5 to 10 on your heart. He wants you to put everybody down. And then what Dan's going to say next week is, now let's pick out of that list the first 5 to 10 that are on your heart. So that now you don't feel like you don't have a business, right? That's the psychology behind it. Does that make sense?
It does, and that's fantastic.
Yeah. Chris, our 30 minutes kind of went into almost an hour.
Yeah, so we did about.
Well, I'm so happy I hopped on the last 5 minutes. Sorry.
No, that's awesome.
I love you guys. I'll see you all in the morning.
Yeah. I don't think we have anything else to add, but if this was a good review, guys, and really respect and appreciate all you guys.
Yeah, this was great.
100%.
Yes.
Likewise, thanks for leading it, ladies.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you very much, ladies. And I'm sorry I was late. I had a health assessment.
Okay. Bless you guys. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Go
Good night.
Astros.
Yeah. Oh, geez. Oh.